Good morning, everyone. It's so good to see so many of you joining us on a Saturday. Early for some, late for others. And we're going to wait a few more minutes and then kick off this very first talk in a hopefully long and successful series. We're breaking new ground. We had about, I think, we had about 50 or 60 people sign up. So we're not there yet. So I'm going to wait a little bit longer and also make sure that our speaker is here. Good morning, Celestina. Yes, good idea. Why don't we use the chat to introduce ourselves? Where are you from? What is on your mind as we've kicked off this semester of teaching in a totally different way? I can tell you that I've never worked as hard in my life as I have this semester. I've literally shoved every responsibility aside to devote myself fully to developing an experience for my students that is meaningful in a remote, because Harvard has gone completely remote. Hello, Tom. Yes, I feel like a first-year teacher too. It's amazing. And I would love at some point to hear about first impressions. And I don't know how it is at the high school level, but I can tell you that among my students who are scattered over the globe, which is a little bit of a logistical problem because I have to bridge time zones, I have never had a class work this hard and this diligently and being so devoted to learning. Maybe it's because I changed my assessment scheme. Maybe it's because I recast my course in the theme of the pandemic. I don't know, but they're literally breathing down my neck in the sense that I am 2 weeks ahead, preparing the material for 2 weeks ahead. And they're already asking me, when can we access that? It's just amazing. Good morning, Krastan. Thank you for joining, and thank you for being the inspiration for all of this. I'm going to wait one more minute and then we'll kick off. Praisy, thank you for joining. And thank you for, kicking this off, being our cheerleader here. I see many names from the workshop this summer, and I see many new names, so that's wonderful. And I hope that you will pass on the message and get your colleagues and friends and others and networks that you are part of to come and join. Let's grow this and let's make this something that is globally useful and exciting so that we all know that we're not alone, which is so important. Okay, well, and look, Filippo from Italy. How nice. I lived in Italy for a while, in Genoa. I went to l'Istituto di Fisica of the Università degli Studi. That was a great time, but a long time ago. Okay, so let's get started here. Welcome to all of you. I'm so incredibly happy and excited and proud to be kicking off this very first in the Harvard PoLS-T talk series, which we're planning on running monthly at this time on a Saturday. And I hope you will not only enjoy this series, but also be willing to contribute. And be willing to contribute by either giving a talk or by suggesting a speaker or by giving feedback on how we can make these talks most useful to the community, to you and the community. So you may wonder, what is the PoLS-T what does PoLS-T stand for? It stands for a new network that is part of a broader effort to improve physics education. A number of years ago, the NSF established the PoLS network, and PoLS stands for Physics of Living Systems, which is a trans-institutional community-based network of graduate students and graduate student educators, all working or doing research on the physics of living system. As we know, physics is not limited to the mechanical world. It underlies all of the, things that are happening in the universe. So this summer we had a workshop to find ways of improving. It was called the NSF-funded Harvard Virtual Workshop, to find ways to improve high school physics education. And we decided at the end of that workshop that it'd be great to have a network of high school physics educators. And in order to sort of leverage the benefit of already having a network at the graduate level, and to bridge also the gap between secondary education and post-secondary education, we decided to put this under the umbrella of the physics of living system. So it's a brand new network. We're still shaping it. We hope that you will consider being part of it and bringing your friends and colleagues, and we hope that we can all benefit from each other. We already have a Slack workspace with people continuously giving advice to each other. So the format will be as follows. We'll try to start punctually in the future. We started a few minutes late, and I will keep my intro remarks much shorter. We'll have a 30-minute talk. The talk is pre-recorded, and we'll send out the link in advance so that you can watch the talk in advance, which means that you could join not at 11 East Coast time or whatever time it is for you now, but 30 minutes later to join the 30 minutes Q&A. We'll be closing the official part exactly after an hour, but the space will remain open for continued discussion. So I will remain on at 12. I will officially thank everybody so that you, without any feeling of guilt, you can click the leave button and enjoy your weekend and go about other things and disconnect from electronic devices. But if you're really excited about something, you can stay and continue the discussion, and I'll try to find a way of organizing breakout rooms so that people can self-organize and we can have breakout rooms. Also, I would like to take another few minutes of the overall time to show how we're going to distribute the recorded talks to make them maximally useful. It was difficult to do it this time because even though we had Praisy's talk and made it available on YouTube, the instructions of getting onto the platform that I'm going to demonstrate to you would have been harder to communicate to you. And so I thought I'm just going to show it to you. So you may want to put the Zoom window to the side. I want to share my browser with you. So why don't you take half of your screen for Zoom and the other half for a browser, so you can see my browser on one side and your own browser on the other. And I would like you to go in your browser to the same URL I have here. I'm going to copy it and put it in the chat here. Where's the chat? Since I'm sharing my screen, the chat has disappeared. There it is. So, and not everybody in the waiting room, but just everyone in the meeting. There we go. Here's the URL, app.perusal.com. If you have an account, just log in. If you don't have an account, click register and type in, I'm going to have to come up with an email that I haven't used yet, and then enter a password. Enter first and last name. I'm going to do the same thing here, and then that CAPTCHA. Okay, and then click register. I must say I've never read these terms of agreement. I'm going to just click yes, confirm my email. Oh God, I have to go to my email. Okay. Let me quickly go to my email. I haven't done this in a while, so I don't even know exactly how it goes. And I thought I'd do that rather than using my usual account, so I can stay in parallel to you. Okay, so I have to confirm my email. And then I want to very, very briefly show, what does it say here? Did I misread what it says there? Oh, I need to click confirm first. There we go. Okay, so you have to click confirm before you get the email. And unfortunately, my email is not, there it is arriving. So once you've confirmed, I want you to do the following. That's why I wanted to actually do this demo for you rather than, and we're recording it. So if you somehow missed it, you can see the recording. So, okay, so now I need to log in. So I'm going to log in now that my email is confirmed. Okay. I hope I remember my password that I used. Yes. Okay, so then it says create or enroll in a course. That's what we want to do. So click create or enroll in a course and say, I am an instructor. You're an instructor. We don't want to create a course right now. Okay, that's annoying. It forces you to create. If you're an instructor, it forces you to create a, so let's do I'm a student. And if you want to upgrade to an instructor account, I can tell you how to do that. I will tell you how to do that. But click I'm a student if you're not. And the course code I want you to enter is in the chat. So just copy the course code that's there in the chat, fill it in, and then say complete setup. And now if you click on library, if you see library there, either at the top on the tab, or you click on readings, it's really not a reading, it's a watching. I'm going to end the tour right away. You can actually see Praisy's talk that we haven't started it yet. You will see it in a minute. And I would say don't play it because it'll play twice. But the reason I want you on here is so that as you watch these pre-recorded videos, you can actually stop the video and click or just click this add comment button here at the top. And if you click the add comment button, you can enter a question or a discussion point or something you find interesting. And other people will be able to react to that comment, answer it. So we can already start an online discussion. I see that one other person is already there, Robert. So we can actually have a asynchronous discussion before we meet together live. And I'll be able to look at it and probably moderate a better discussion if I know what people are wondering. And the speaker too can prepare him or herself. Okay, so this is now recorded. So if you have not been able to follow, it's not a problem because you'll be able to review the recording and do it at your leisure, which is much easier than following written instructions, which we would have to send out otherwise. So without further ado, I would like to turn now to oh no, I have one more thing to say, but I'll say that at the end. How I would like to actually find a way of connecting my course to all of you. So I'll do that at the end. So I'd like to introduce Praisy. Thank you so much for coming back, Praisy. It's really great to see you. And thank you for getting up early because I know you're on the West Coast. Praisy holds a master's degree in secondary education and teaching of the University of Southern California. And she currently is a science teacher at Edison High School in the Huntington Beach Union High School District of Huntington, California. We heard Praisy speak this summer on, she gave a great talk on teaching as a fallback, which is not what she will be talking about now. She will speak today about culturally relevant pedagogy in the high school physics classroom. Praisy, I'm turning it over to you.
Hello, well, thank you for introducing me. I think we can just jump into the video from here.
That was my intent.
Oh, okay.
And feel free to use the chat during the talk. Put your questions there.
Hello, my name is Praisy Poluan, and I'm here today to discuss culturally relevant pedagogy in the high school physics classroom. First, let's think big picture. As physics educators, what have we learned is most conducive to learning? I'll pause for a moment for you to think and maybe jot down some responses. What you've likely learned in your credentialed program and or through your teaching experience is that instructional strategies such as hands-on activities, project or problem-based learning, engineering, applications, modeling, and other such instructional strategies are effective. Your programs and experience may also describe the development of relationships through name, face, story, mindfulness, check-ins, and greetings into a positive classroom environment as essential for student learning. Now, to combine these two, instructional strategies and a positive classroom climate in order to maximize student learning, that is what culturally relevant or responsive pedagogy is. Culturally responsive teaching includes using the cultures, experiences, and perspectives of students not only to teach them academic knowledge and skills, but also to unpack the unequal distributions of power and privilege, and to teach students cultural competence about themselves and others. Now, the importance of the first piece, using culturally responsive pedagogy to teach students academic knowledge and skills, is not as difficult to explain. Our job descriptions say to teach them physics per NGSS, and as we just reasoned, culturally relevant teaching is the best way to fulfill that. But what is this now about power and privilege and cultural competence? I thought we were talking about pedagogy in the high school physics classroom. Well, let's situate this again in our classrooms in order to understand where power and privilege come into play. First, the power dynamics. With your basic student-teacher relationship, there will always be some sort of power dynamic. We're there to teach our students, they're there to learn from us. So we can create as safe and comfortable of an environment as possible, yet we'll still hold some sort of power over them, which inevitably affects the classroom climate. We can still be effective teachers though, but from there, how do we know when we are effective? In other words, how can students show just how much they're learning? If you ask a physics teacher, probably they're going to say lab reports, tests, homework. But how do we know that these activities are really conducive to learning, or that they even show a student's mastery? Because the majority have explained themselves thoroughly on lab reports? The majority have aced the tests and completed the homework to indicate that they know physics? What about your other students though? The non-majority, the minority, the marginalized. If you have an ESL student that can barely write lab reports, does that mean that they don't understand the physics behind the lab? If you have a student with test anxiety, performing poorly on tests or quizzes, does that mean that they don't understand the physics behind what you're doing in the classroom? If you have a student that goes straight to work after school and they have no time for homework afterwards because they're supporting their families, does that mean that they don't understand physics? Gay and Kirkland described the cycle of sticking to what we know from our experiences. Again, lab reports, tests, practice problems, just like our teachers probably did with us. I know that's what my teacher did, and I learned physics. And yes, they may sometimes be the way to go. Yes, physics is complex and it requires a lot of practice and hands-on labs. But we also need to consider the dynamics of power and privilege, such that continuing that cycle of sticking to what we know with the labs and notes, rather than challenging that, might actually perpetuate hegemony. After all, what we know is what those with power and privilege want us to know, isn't it? Those with power and privilege set up all of our nation's systems, the system of education included. So arguably, hegemonic principles are what we know. They're what our students know. Yes, they're what our students need to know because that's just survival in the real world. But what our students should also know then is how to change the system so that this scrambling for survival is no longer necessary for anyone. They must learn to unpack the power and the privilege that is the real world in order to fight against those inequitable power dynamics for themselves and for those who can't. It is just as important to know how to survive the real hegemonic world as it is to be educated on the reality of the power imbalance, why it exists, how it affects their lives, and how to overcome it. Challenging that status quo is essential to discovering alternate paths to learning, potentially unknown paths for development outside of the known paths in the cycle in terms of the labs and the tests and so on. It challenges that and it allows us to learn those new paths outside of what we continue to perpetuate in our classroom. So, as educators, we need to figure out how to find that balance. The balance between preparing students for the real world power dynamics and preparing students to overcome the hegemony in order to gain the flexibility and freedom of expression. This is quite a feat. It requires quite a change, and even small changes are uncomfortable for most people. This culture of change, that's a phenomenon when it really should be embraced, but that's a whole other conversation that we talked a little bit about over summer. I'm reminded of Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, where Freire argues that the oppressed must free themselves from their oppressors. This is because the oppressors either won't or perhaps they don't know how to. The power imbalance is similar to this dynamic. So as the ones in power in our classrooms, it's up to us to teach our students, the ones not in power, to free themselves. I have here an example of where we might consider beginning to make small changes. Now, before I learned about culturally relevant pedagogy and the power and privilege at play in our classrooms and through our assignments, I went through the motions as my physics teachers and professors did with me. Structured notes, homework, practice problems, labs, tests, and so on. I had always thought that science is just science, and as long as I make sure to make my labs fun and hands-on and engaging, then that's going to be enough for students because that was enough for me and that was enough for everybody else that I knew. I didn't realize just how restrictive these structures could be. In my master's and doctorate programs, though, I started to study more about culturally responsive pedagogy and critical literacy, and that's where I began to analyze my own instruction and make changes. This is the very first lab that I do in physics. We start off the year teaching about careers in physics, physics degrees, then jump straight into taking measurements and doing calculations while taking significant figures into account. Before, I had students take accurate and precise measurements of their physics book. Then I had them find the volume of it. And then they would take all of that and write a formal structured lab report detailing their process, their calculations, and their analysis. Then I took these classes that I'm referring to from my master's and doctorate programs where we talked more about culturally relevant pedagogy. And I started thinking about just how structured my entire class is. Now, don't get me wrong, structure and routine, these are great for students. They definitely need that in their lives. But the structure and routines that are currently set up, those tend to cater to the majority. And the majority tends to be those who already start with a little bit more power and privilege than their marginalized peers. While some of my assignments, like assessments, some notes, and so on, yes, they do require structure, and that structure may be more so effective in preparing students for the real world where they'll encounter similar structures. While that may be true, I also have the opportunity to encourage students to explore physics freely while still fulfilling the same objectives. So I thought about which of the assignments I could adjust and what parts of those assignments I could lift the restrictions from. So that's where this example comes into play. Why do I need to restrict kids to their physics book? Technically, they can show accurate and precise measurements of anything. Why restrict students to calculating volume? They can show calculations, they can show conversions, and they can show significant figures in so many different ways. And lastly, why restrict them to writing formal lab reports? Well, this one kind of makes sense since they're going to encounter similar structures in college when they take college science classes, and they might encounter similar structures in the workforce also if they have to fill out reports or whatever it might be. But for my class in particular, we already do college level lab reports once a quarter. We already do structured notes. We already do semi-structured practice problems and assessments. So for these labs and similar activities, why not give them the freedom to express their understanding and break free from the hegemony through their labs in ways that they want to and what works best for them? This is where my Freedom Lab comes in. So I took this lab, I adjusted those points that I just mentioned. And this actually happens to be the first year that I tried this lab. The results were amazing. Instead of restricting students to the physics book like before, I asked them to use any appropriate item or items if they wanted to do this multiple times, and use any medium or media to present their content and present their understanding. And I just gave them those three objectives: taking measurements using SI units both accurately and precisely, like we discussed in the notes, perform unit and prefix conversions, rounding to the correct number of significant figures, and lastly, I'm explaining the importance of accuracy and precision in both science and everyday life. And of course, we do want a little bit of structure there. So on top of these objectives, I asked them to document the process and the product. I can't see them measuring and what measuring device they use, so make sure that I didn't tell them this, but they figured out they have to take a photo of it so I can make sure they're measuring accurately and precisely, and make sure it's organized and easy to follow. The results were amazing. Students were just as able to show me their understanding of measurements and conversions and significant figures, just as able to do so here as they were with the regular lab reports. And honestly, some of them had even more fun doing this. I received a wide range of items measured, and I received a wide range of forms of submission. So standard lab reports, there were students who preferred that. I had presentations, I had with amazing visuals. I had students cutting and editing videos, and I had students posting this on social media saying, my physics teacher let me turn in an assignment on TikTok or whatever other social media they might use. And we're even spreading the word about physics out there and how fun it can be. Like I said, they clearly had so much fun expressing themselves, and I had so much fun grading these. They were obviously tired of the restrictions that they were used to from before, and they jumped at the opportunity to break free from the marginalization. My goal now is to adjust as many of my labs as possible to become less restrictive before moving on to analyzing and adjusting the rest of my pedagogy. Now, these are the little yet kind of big steps we can take to truly and critically reflecting on our practice and improving it for the benefit of our students. All right, so we've talked about what culturally responsive or relevant pedagogy is. We've talked about why it's important in terms of combining instruction and environment for our students, and a little bit about how to address it and why for student learning. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about how we analyze and integrate this into our daily instruction. So all the beginning pieces here that we're missing from this slide that come prior to what we've discussed, that's what we're going to talk about next. Okay, so earlier we discussed how essential it is to have a positive classroom environment. But now let's be a little bit more specific. What kind of classroom culture are we working to attain? In other words, how do you want your students to feel when they are in your classroom? Again, I'll pause for a quick moment. I know I gave you a little sneak peek there, but I'll pause for a moment for you to think and respond and maybe jot down some responses. supported, safe, comfortable, acknowledged, motivated, confident, able. So you probably thought of at least one of these words. All of the educators that I have asked said these. Research says these. This is how our students should feel when they are in our classrooms. Research also says that in order for students to effectively learn any kind of content, physics or otherwise, they must first be in what they feel is a safe, positive classroom environment. Now, bearing that in mind, I asked students and staff about their experiences. Here are some of their responses. A classmate of mine freshman year would send me anti-Semitic infographics. They contained derogatory slurs and depictions of Jewish people, which he would relate to me and my family. I would block him on whatever platform he was sending me these messages on, and he would move on to the next. The same year, a few of my other classmates came to my house in the middle of the night. They covered my roof and windows in food and drew a swastika on my driveway. Certain students would turn around in front of me and tell another student that their eyes looked chinky in order to say that the person looked tired. In the time leading up to the pandemic, students would avoid sitting near me. They would occasionally cough and make xenophobic comments about how China's wet markets were responsible for COVID-19 in America. I never took action as, being the minority in the class, most of the other students wouldn't side with me and would call me sensitive. Well, you know, I prefer to teach Asians from 10 years ago than the ones we have now. I'm half Mexican and half Irish and very proud of both. Throughout my life, I have felt like I didn't really belong in either category. I grew up in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood, and since on the exterior I basically look white, I was too white for them. I was also in the Puente program, which is amazing for students who will be the first in their family to attend or graduate from college, but I constantly had to explain why I belonged there. These experiences are not outliers, and they surely are not indicative of the brave and safe environment that we hope to attain. Now, in order to create such an environment, we need to become cognizant of our beliefs and values or positionalities and how they affect our perceptions of and interactions with students. So, what exactly do I mean by positionality? Positionality refers to the social and political context that creates your diverse identity. It's important for us to be aware of our positionalities because they influence our understanding of and outlook on the world, which means that they influence our interactions with our students. Positionality gives you both explicit and implicit biases. These biases are evident in our teaching and our actions, but it's okay. Biases are normal. There's no reason to feel afraid or defensive of your biases as long as we learn to recognize and address them, because if we don't, we can inadvertently celebrate or devalue our students' lives and experiences if we don't do so. We have to situate ourselves and our students in the context of our classrooms. We must become aware of our values and beliefs, or our positionalities, and how they affect our perceptions of and interactions with students. As educators, we must also be empathetic to how our students' positionalities and how their experiences have shaped their perceptions of and interactions with us and their peers. Being aware of the social and political contexts that create our diverse identities and those of our students allows us to engage in culturally responsive pedagogy. Our beliefs and values matter because they affect how we perceive and interact with our students, especially when we ourselves don't even realize it. So let's try situating ourselves right now. This diagram that I'm going to show you in a second, this diagram shows one of the ways we can situate ourselves and our students. Now this center here, this describes the majority according to our context. So we're going to use mine as an example in a second. First, we need to identify the aspects of diversity that describe the center or the majority. I've listed some on the side here. Please keep in mind that these are not all of the aspects of diversity that describe diversity. This is just a few of the several that I've listed. Okay, so step one, we have to describe the majority. Step two is to situate ourselves and the various aspects of our identities from this list that put us in the center with the majority or in the margin with the marginalized. See that play on words? There's also different levels of centricity and marginalization exhibited by distance from the center. So let's take an example now. Where I work in Huntington Beach, the center for the first two bullet points there would be race ethnicity would be white Caucasian. Now that is our center. I'm Indonesian American, so I lie somewhere in the margin, but not quite as close to the edge as other marginalized races or ethnicities might be. So maybe I'm going to be right about here. Again, with language in Huntington Beach, most people speak only English. There's some who might speak other languages. I think the more common one is Spanish. So that would be the center. I'm trilingual. Clearly, English is one of the languages I speak, but the other two are not Spanish. So I would still be in the center, but again, at the edge of the center because of the other two languages that I speak. And so on and so forth. We would continue this with all the other aspects of diversity. So what we also need to consider, though, is perception when we're situating ourselves and especially our students. You may perceive me in a way that's different from how I identify, or vice versa. So for example, I identify with my Indonesian heritage just as much as I identify with my American culture. But people may not perceive me as Indonesian American the way that I do because of how I look or because of the fact that I speak English fluently. Okay, so now that we've situated ourselves and our context, finally, we situate our students in order to see where they are in relation to the center of our context as well as in relation to us. Keep in mind, we would want to do this with individual students rather than, our students as a whole, because we need to understand each of our students and differentiate instruction rather than categorizing them. Now, this is clearly a lot of work for you to do with every single student. Remember, the point for us is to be cognizant of our students' positionalities in order to exercise culturally responsive teaching. So this sort of activity is just to situate ourselves and our students. You can have them do something like this all at once on Pear Deck. I actually did that with the staff. And then you can spend more time analyzing the variation of the results with the students. And you can get them in on it too, so they also gain cultural competence. You'd be surprised how surprised our students are when they see the spread from the center to the margin of their peers. It's anonymous if you choose the right app. Working with your students to identify all of these relationships between these variables of diversity and between our different positionalities. Working with our students will help both parties gain more understanding of one another, which will allow us to better engage in culturally responsive teaching and learning. That being said, a common response to the idea of culturally responsive pedagogy and awareness of positionalities is, well, I don't see color. People are just people. Or, but shouldn't we just treat all students the same? But the fact of the matter is, we don't, and we shouldn't. All of our students come from different backgrounds. They have different experiences. So to treat all students the exact same is just to deny their past experiences. And to deny their past experiences, and especially the existence of racial boundaries, that is colorblindness. As Cross puts it, in order to improve the quality of education for students in urban communities, the dialogue about the impact of race and other marginalized identities needs to exist. Ignoring students' race and ignoring the other aspects of their diverse identities is just denigrating their experiences and their lives. This does not create a positive classroom environment. Now, in response to conversations about the negative impact of colorblindness, people might respond that making everything about race is racist. This is not true. This is color muteness. This is race talk resistance. It's yet another defensive reaction to what needs to be an open, safe, vulnerable conversation. Talking about race, culture, equity, diversity, these are already difficult conversations to have, especially in our classrooms. And resistance to the conversations makes it even more difficult. In everyday life, people use race labels in a variety of ways, without thinking twice, avoiding them at all costs, or only in the description of particular situations. It's time to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. It's time to think twice about our words, to stop avoiding them at all costs, and to review what situations we do or don't use them in. Again, I'm going to reference Cross. Educators at all levels need to constantly examine their efforts to determine how their work may actually trivialize race and exacerbate an already dismal situation. They may actually teach racism. Now that we've considered our own positionalities in situating ourselves and our instruction, we talked a little bit about situating our students, but let's talk more about being aware of our students' positionalities in order to situate them and exercise culturally responsive pedagogy. Let's say you have a student named Yuri. Yuri is an East Asian student that's known to have a temper and frequently curse out the teachers. Her twin sister is in all of the same classes, but behaves in the opposite manner during class. How might you respond to Yuri? Perhaps you think Yuri doesn't care, not this behavior is attention-seeking. You might wonder if this is sibling rivalry and if the behavior is consistent across classes, and perhaps it's reflective of her home or cultural situation. You might even ask if maybe drugs, mental health, or language plays a part in this. The fact of the matter is, your thoughts and your assumptions about Yuri form from your explicit and implicit biases. All of these questions and these possible responses that I've just posed, that comes from your biases, which comes from your experiences. Again, don't freak out. It's okay to have these biases, but now is when you take the opportunity to identify those biases and address them instead of just sticking with them. So think, what caused you to make specific assumptions or ask those specific questions about Yuri? What can you do to address those assumptions for Yuri as well as your other students? Chances are you're looking for more information about Yuri. Oftentimes, though, this is all the information we get, so it's up to us to gather more information in order to better situate our students as well as to address our biases. So you ask other staff and you even ask Yuri, and you find out that both of Yuri's parents work overtime, leaving Yuri in charge of all the younger siblings. By the time she has a chance to work on assignments, it's already way past bedtime, which means she can barely sleep. On the other hand, Yuri's twin doesn't have to help with the siblings, which allows her to complete homework and get to bed on time. Okay, now that you have more information about Yuri's positionality, but remember though, you don't have all the information, just some more. How might you respond to the situation? Just as importantly, how might Yuri respond to how you reacted before or how you react afterwards to the situation? That's going to affect your classroom dynamic significantly. That's where you respond with culturally responsive pedagogy. All right, now for the big reveal. This example was actually taken from my personal experience when I first entered education as an avid tutor. I wasn't even on the path to education. That's actually how I got on the path. That's a whole other story. So I worked with a set of Hispanic twins. I was helping one of them out when she snapped at me, and I didn't know much about her other than the fact that her twin was in that same class and was much nicer to me. So I asked that student why she snapped at me when I was just trying to help. And then for the rest of class, she just stayed quiet. She didn't even respond to me. Because I didn't know the twins' background and positionalities, I just assumed that they were like me and most other people, coming to class to learn and nice to people who are also nice to you or trying to help you and whatnot. That was my bias coming into play, and I didn't question that until years later. So at the end of class, I explained what happened to the teacher and why the twins behaved so differently from each other, and why the first twin may have snapped at me. The teacher explained to me the backstory about the parents working and the twins having to take care of the siblings, and I instantly got flashbacks to my junior year and senior years of high school when my parents went through a divorce and my brother and I were caught in the middle, and sometimes I had to take care of him. I was tired a lot during school too for the same reasons, but I hadn't connected the dots. So no wonder the twin was so snappy. I finally understood and connected with her at least a little more, not to mention connected that experience to what it revealed about me when I was growing up. I was able to interact with her a lot better, and as a result, she definitely interacted with me a lot better, and she was able to learn a lot better from there. So you see, part of understanding your own positionality is being able to reflect and think about how it impacts your interactions with others. Ignoring students' positionalities is similar, like I said before, just saying that their lived experiences don't exist or that they don't matter. And it also bars you from critically reflecting on your own lived experiences and how they affect you as a teacher and as a person. So now that we've tied together all of the components of culturally relevant pedagogy, the what, the why, and how, let's wrap up. Our context frame our experiences, which form our positionalities, which give us explicit and implicit biases, which we must analyze and address in order to practice culturally responsive pedagogy. This pedagogy is evident in our instruction and the classroom environment that we create, which ultimately affects student learning. Okay, thank you for joining me. I look forward to discussing culturally relevant or responsive pedagogy in the high school physics classroom with you.
Thank you very much, Praisy. Terima kasih. I didn't know you were from Indonesia, and it's one of my absolute favorite countries to have ever visited. And thank you for an absolutely fascinating talks. So in order to moderate this discussion, and again, it'll be a short general discussion, and then we'll decide how to continue for those who want to continue. If you want to stay on and there's something in particular you'd like to discuss with other people present, say in the chat, after this is over, I'd like to discuss blah, blah, blah. This way we can sort of self-organize into breakout rooms. Look at the, I don't know, yes, of course you were able to follow the chat because we were playing the recording, Praisy, but you saw that there was a very lively discussion. If you want to ask a general question here before we break into groups and before we officially close the official part of this talk, click on participant list and raise your hand. And while people get in line to ask questions, I had right at the beginning of your talk, I had a question. You said I think on your second or third slide, you said, what is a culturally responsive pedagogy? And then you mentioned using the cultures, perspectives, and experiences of your students. And you know, I presume that being in Los Angeles, you have a very diverse group of students, and it's the same thing for me at Harvard. Since Harvard has a neat blind admissions policy, we have tremendous diversity in the classroom of experiences, cultures, everything. But I presume we have some people from Europe, and I was educated in Europe, so I speak from my own experience as a high school student in Europe, and we also have people from less culturally diverse parts of the US. How do you do that? How do you share these experiences when there's nobody to represent them? What advice would you have for teachers who, unlike you and me, are in an environment where there is not that, you know, diversity that you can benefit from?
So I spend the first week, 2 weeks, personally, I spend the first 1 to 2 weeks very focused on the students. We start at a half week. Our first week is actually a half week. So there's those first 3 days for us. There's a lot of also class switching going on. And so if I actually start content, it doesn't do much since I have to restart it again the following week. So those first 3 days are the days I do the usual, you know, talk about syllabus and things like that. But I have a lot of very personalized activities. I do this thing called Who Am I slides, where I have a slide with 4 images and 4 descriptions to match those images of myself. And then I ask students to fill out a slide of their own, also detailing information about themselves. And then okay, this is where it gets really time consuming, but I found it to be worth it. And I got this from one of my professors just a few semesters ago. After filling out their own Who Am I slide, that's what I call the activity, I actually email every single student with like a 2 to 3 sentence comment about what's on those slides. And it helps me remember facts about them and reaching out to them. They don't get personalized emails very often, especially at the beginning of the year. So it definitely draws connections there. And yes, it takes a lot of time. And yes, I know we're all very busy, especially with the transition to remote learning, but it is worth it. My classroom climate from the day after significantly improves. I also do a careers in physics lesson, thanks to the Step Up program. And a part of that lesson is where they create their own career profile, talking about what they want to do and how physics could contribute to that. So from there, I also start to remember what they want to do for careers. A lot of them want to be engineers. A lot of them, I convinced them to take physics, even though they're not planning to pursue the STEM fields. So then I start getting speakers based off of what they respond. Like for example, and luckily I have a lot of siblings who are open to speaking. And so I just recruit my siblings or their coworkers, or I network through them to get some speakers to just speak for like 10 to 20 minutes with a 5-minute Q&A or whatever it might be. And, you know, I tell them, yeah, it's because a lot of you guys said you wanted to be a software engineer. So here I have a software engineer, and so on and so forth. And just continuing that. Now, I also, another way I include the students' positionalities is through music. And so my word problems, I change a lot of the people in the word problems to me and like their favorite rappers or their favorite musicians. And I pretend, I do this a lot, and the kids will either find it silly or they'll appreciate it, but either way you get their attention. I'll have like Miss P and whatever your favorite rapper is, go honeymoon in Hawaii. The plane takes off at however many kilometers per hour. And so it grabs their attention, and they're like, oh yeah, she remembers that we like that singer or we like that musician. So the little things, it makes them chuckle a little and just definitely improves the classroom environment from there.
That's wonderful. So one thing that I did, it was suggested by a colleague at the University of Michigan, and in hindsight, it was such a great idea, but I would never have thought about it on my own, was I made since we're completely remote, my entire course is on Canvas, and I made a 90-second video of myself about me, and I told the students that their first assignment would be to make a little 90-second video about themselves. So there's this whole collection of little 90-second videos. And since, you know, some are in Israel, others in Saudi Arabia, others in Latin America, and in Europe, I mean, it's just this wonderful global environment. We have 2 questions here. Clay, you had your hand up first, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, hi, thank you, everyone. Quick question to kind of carry on about using music to help connect with the students. When I was teaching, I tried to instead of using the same European white guys, you know, Newton and whoever, to show that the ideas or where they came from. Does anyone know of a resource or where I could find information? Like, I assume that there are some really great Chinese physicists in the past, but I have no idea who they are. I'm sure that there are some Hispanic mathematicians that made some great discoveries, but I don't know who they are. So is there somewhere that I could find a diverse group of people who have made these great discoveries so that I can tie that into my lessons, so that all the students in my class that is really diverse aren't seeing the same 3 white guys every year when they get presented force or motion? So that's my question, is a resource available?
Sorry, I was muted here. I was speaking, but I was muted. I think that's a very good question. And I suggest that people put ideas into the chat, given the only few minutes that we have left here, so that everybody can benefit from those resources. I'm definitely interested in it myself. Martha already put in one item about videos of people in STEM careers that I definitely do peruse. Okay, thank you, Clay. Next is Cecilia. Oh, and maybe that, I forgot, Clay, where you're from, and maybe that when we ask questions, we can very briefly introduce ourselves, say where you're from.
Yeah, sorry. I'm in Texas, and I was a physics teacher in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for 10 years, and I currently work as the teacher in residence, which is a phys tech program at Texas A&M Commerce, and we're trying to recruit and train physics teachers specifically, but then also other STEM teachers for the Northeast Texas region, which is pretty rural, and so we're trying to get some highly qualified teachers out there in that area.
Wonderful. Cecilia, over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Well, let me introduce myself. I'm a physics teacher. I'm starting teaching kids from 12 till 18. And I'm in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And I'm working on project-based education system. So it's a pretty new system and I'm very glad with it. But I would have one question to Praisy, because we do have kind of weekly meetings to learn more about our students in small groups. And I'm curious if there is any like pedagogical step that we can take in weekly meetings where we can learn more about our students.
So if you're thinking remotely, I personally do a chat check-in every day while I take attendance. So on like my digital weekly agenda, I share my screen and throw that up, and it's really random stuff. Favorite musician, favorite color, childhood imaginary friend, things like that. And I have them all type it into the chat while I take attendance. And then when I get a chance, I start looking at them and then commenting back, and even sharing connecting them with my experiences. And it's weird because I feel like I've been talking to myself a lot because they're talking in the chat and I'm just responding with my own story. But chances are, if you show you want to get to know them, they show that they want to get to know you as well. And your stories might interest them as well. So that's just one small thing I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Praisy, and thank you, Cecilia, for your question. The final question will be from Ms. Monti. Over to you. Be sure to unmute yourself. We cannot hear you.
Oh, I guess that would help. Well, good morning. I am Ms. Monti. I am coming from Newport News, Virginia. I am at Warwick High School, best high school in the world. Gotta say it. But I have a whole lot of questions. The first question, the gentleman was asking about how to find different cultures. I simply Googled because I wanted to make sure I'm in our school, we have Hispanics, we have so many mixed races. So in my classroom, especially on my website for the school, I have Black physicists that people have never seen. So I simply Googled by ethnic group, and I had a whole lot of success. That's one way to get that, get that information. And the question I have is two. One, I would love for you to speak at my school. I think what you said today would help some of our teachers that are struggling with trying to close their eyes and just teach our babies. So that was it. I think what you said is powerful and needs to be said. I need you to come to my school. And I like when you, how can we have more discussion on color muteness? That was awesome. And I like the way, I think what you said is so needed across all high schools. And it's really important that you come, especially to the South, because we have children of every group that can love physics if love was in the physics classroom. And so they have to understand how to do that. And I think your presentation would do that. So I would love for you to come from my school, that's one. And how can we start talking more about race, talk, resistance? I like that. Okay, that's all I had. Sorry, I'm done. Thank you.
I would love to talk at your school, and I'm flattered that you would like me there. Yeah, we can definitely connect and talk about that. In terms of race talk resistance, I will say I'm from LA. I'm from Koreatown. I'm from Koreatown right after the riots. So like I grew up around a lot of diversity and just a little more openness about race talk. And then I moved to Orange County. And it wasn't as bad, but then I moved to South Orange County. And right now I teach in South Orange County. And I teach at the least diverse school with the most resistance. And so in terms of, to answer your question about talking about that, it is extremely challenging when you're in a place with very little diversity, when you are a young, relatively new teacher who is also a minority. And so first, I would definitely say, look for people who are, I don't want to say on your side because it's not really about sides, right? But look for people who are open to having that conversation and supporting you. And what I ended up doing was I'm a teacher I took up a position of teacher on special assignment. So a TOSA position for a multi-tiered system of interventions. And so my other job is also to provide academic and behavioral and social emotional support. And my point being, through that position, I created a team on diversity, equity, and inclusion with the support of my administrator. And we started building our team for the other teachers and staff, even make sure to include all staff, who also noticed these inequities on campus and racism and microaggressions, microabuse, and all of that. And we started having a conversation. We started putting these presentations together, and we started presenting to all staff. So we're working on getting funding for implicit bias training, for all of these different things for us, so we can become experts on it and then push it out to all staff. And it's way easier said than done. And it's a very long process. I've had multiple conversations with my administrators about how, like, why can't this happen? Why is this still happening? And they're like, look, we were here 30 years ago as students, and the fact that this conversation is happening right now is already something huge. So we need you to just be patient. And I'm like, I'm not patient. I don't like this. But it's true. That's just the way that it is. So try and take those steps if possible. I'm pretty sure almost every site has that position or something along. Some schools call it PBIS, some schools call it different things, but there's going to be somebody, or you can create that position if it's not there and talk to a supporting administrator about it.
Well, thank you so much, Praisy, and thank you all for making the time on what is here in Massachusetts, a beautifully sunny Saturday morning. Okay, does it work again? Can you hear me? I guess my headset ran out of battery power. So thank you so much for making the time. I'm going to close with 3 announcements. And what I would like to recommend is that those of you who would like to stay and continue to discuss, stay behind, and then we'll self-organize. So one person asked me, can I share the perusal site with others? By all means, bring in your colleagues and have the more people benefit from Praisy's talks and future talk, the better. Finally, as I announced on the Slack workspace, I'm going to have a fair on October 13, where my students who are working on a project in kinematics, momentum, and energy have been told to make a pedagogical presentation or lesson plan, which they will present on October 13. And I have a form. I'll put the link in the chat. If you're able to come to judge those presentations, and ideally even bring in your students, that would be fabulous. I would love to see some connection between the students in my class and your students, as well as yourself. And lastly, our next talk will be Saturday, October the 24th, at the same time, 11 Eastern time. And the speaker is Robert Krakow, who is at Stony Brook University, and he will give a two-part talk. The first part is a brief historical perspective of physics education in the US. And the second part is how to use Arduinos and cell phones to make practical labs, something I'm very interested in because my students are remote and we're actually trying to build in a laboratory components. I hope you will join us. More news will follow, and as soon as the talk is recorded, we'll put it on perusal. So again, thank you very much. Those of you who want to continue, please stay behind. Those of you who want to go and enjoy your Saturday, feel free to leave without worrying about being impolite. I totally understand. Thank you all.
Thank you, Eric.
Well, thank you, Kristan. Thank you for inspiring this whole series.